Bradley Moss, the judge basically just took Jack Smith's pleading on the rules, his suggestion in writing on what these rules should be, put her name on it, and put it out. Judges do that all the time. It's okay, but it does not take a month to do that.
Yeah, everyone's trying to figure out why this took so long, and it's not really clear what was possibly dragging this out. Were there other sealed, discussions behind the scenes that we don't know about? Who knows? I don't think there were. I think this was just Judge Cannon taking her sweet time. But in the end, I don't see this as really causing too much harm to the case itself. This thing's still set for trial in 8 months. Discovery now, all aspects, classified and unclassified, can now go forward and be completed, and things can get rolling. The two sides can start looking towards what they'll do with pretrial motions, which is where this case will really be handled and litigated in the end. So Judge Cannon may have bought Donald Trump a month, but it's a month that's not going to save him in the end. All indications are this thing can still make it to trial in May.
And Harry Litman, remember those things Donald Trump used to say about they're not classified? These documents aren't classified. I magically declassified them and I own them. They belong to me. Those things kind of disappeared when the judge got around to issuing this order.
They did, but it was such a fanciful claim on his part, and her order really is unremarkable. It's just boilerplate, and you would see it, more or less anywhere. Though this is a complicated area, to be sure. But the month is, I think, the sort of headline here. Brad's, of course, right. There's still time, but the question is, will there be a month here, 2 weeks there, et cetera? And part of it for her, remember, she's very inexperienced as a judge in criminal matters. She's probably very scared of messing up and doesn't have the colleagues around her as, say, Judge Chutkan does in D.C. So that might have been cause for it, but it doesn't augur speediness down the line. As Brad says, the pretrial motions will come in if she's as methodical and skittish about those as she is about these. Donald Trump sails past November easily, at least in Mar-a-Lago.
So the judge's order included this description, as acknowledged by the special counsel, the classified information in this case described on September 12, 2023, as consisting of approximately 3,500 pages classified at various levels, is now discoverable information. So, Bradley Moss, 3,500 pages classified at various levels.
Yeah, and think about it. Let's say, for example, maybe 10, 15% of that isn't necessarily what Donald Trump either had at Mar-a-Lago or what he turned over. Let's say it from various parts of the investigation. Those are additional classified pieces. Even if you take out 10, 15%, you're still talking about 3,000 pages of classified records, up to and including top secret, sitting in bankers' boxes at Mar-a-Lago. This was the entire crux of the concern that the FBI had the whole time. This was the crux of the concern that NARA had, was that there were tons of records there. Donald Trump had them. He knew he had them. He was hiding it. He was fooling his lawyers and misleading them. And according to the superseding indictment, he had people like Waltine Nauta helping him hide the boxes and hide the records from the FBI when they were executing a subpoena. This is the entire crux of the case against him, is how much he had and that he knew he had it.
And Harry Litman, at least one of those documents was famously found in his desk, in his drawer of his desk. As this trial unfolds, will we ever know what was in the contents of the classified document that was, for example, in his desk?
I mean, it'll depend on what the witnesses have told him. But remember, we had his sort of brandishing another document, and we learned through witnesses that was quite a serious, very sensitive document involving plans to potentially attack a foreign nation. So we won't know from him. But if they have either forensics or more likely a witness that he waves it in front of, then we will know. But remember, the charges here it's the linchpin of them that they are classified, but it doesn't depend on how classified or the level of them. He took classified of whatever level he knew he shouldn't, and we go from there. So it's not going to fall to the government except for extra atmosphere to show just how serious they were. The crimes, classified and national defense material, period.